Right. Okay. Actually, I did a version of this talk at the Grampians group, so it should be Coolan Nation really more in this area, but I also want to acknowledge our First People and pay my respects to elders past and present. This little photo was taken at Central Creek Grasslands. It's quite amazing that in the middle of Melbourne, below Marnie's Road in Reservoir, there's still remnant grasslands in their natural state and kangaroos to go with it. Next one. Next slide there, Adrian. A lot of my knowledge about Indigenous grasslands and the flora comes from working on this book. A committee of volunteers with Australian Plant Society Keilor Plains took 10 years to write the book. And it was a labour of love. And we printed 8,000 of them. We've still got about 3,000 left. So there's plenty of copies, and it goes into, it's really a gardener's guide. So it's the things that do look good in a garden, and that's sort of what I'm going to focus on today as well. So it's not purely grasslands either, grassy woodlands, flora, and flora really of the volcanic plains. But it's a great little book, and you can generally buy it at your local Indigenous nursery. Next. So let's look at the volcanic plains. People in the Grassy Plains network will know about this slide because that's the source of the slide. But this just shows the vast extent of the volcanic plains of Victoria. I understand the third largest volcanic plain in the world. And you can see the pure grasslands in the browny colour, and the purple is all that's left. And there's about 0.2% left in its natural state. So it's a complex ecosystem of herbs and lilies and not just grasses. And it's severely under threat. Next, just a little bit about the volcanic plain. So the volcanic activity started 4.5 million years ago and continued until 10,000 years ago, with eruptions about every 10,000 years. So perhaps we're due for one. The hot spots these days are more over in South Australia, though. There were massive explosive eruptions in some places, perhaps down around Camperdown. You've seen the big crater lakes there, but mainly they were small volcanoes, and the lava spread out all over the landscape, filling up valleys and just spreading a thin layer all over the place. So native grasslands are focused on these areas, long weathering, basalt clays, cracking clay soils, generally fertile but poorly drained. And there's a whole range of areas which to the west of Victoria that get a lot of rainfall, and in the rain shadow areas around the west of Melbourne that don't get much at all. Next. So you can see in places that are exposed, like the Organ Pipes National Park in Keilor, which is worth visiting if you haven't, how deep that lava flow there. That's where very deep lava has cooled slowly, and when it cools slowly, it forms these great big long crystals, essentially, giant crystals that make up the columns. And the Friends of Organ Pipes National Park celebrated their 50 years recently. They've done heaps of work revegetating the area around here with Indigenous plants. So I'm not only talking about plants of the grasslands, but also the escarpments and associated volcanic plains. Next. When you do find patches in their original state, they can be really beautiful. So there's just a couple of patches on railway lines towards Sunbury, and they're just stunning. And railway lines are often pretty good because they were burnt. Luckily now, of course, they've designed railway carriages that spray glyphosate out the back, but before that, they were regularly burnt. There's only 0.2% left. Next. So the plants, over 615 species of plants occur naturally on the grasslands, very complex ecosystem. And 60 of those species are the Fauna and Flora Guarantee Act threatened species list, but unfortunately 42 of those do not have action statements and funding to, save them. Plants such as the spiny rice flower, matted flax lily, swamp everlasting, and the sunshine diurus are critically endangered. You can help a bit by growing these things. Well, perhaps not the sunshine diurus. You might need a permit for that. Part of the ecosystem you won't be able to match in your garden was, of course, fire. Grassy woodlands designed to be, and grassy plains designed to be burnt regularly. In fact, Thermita can take over too much and take over an area and blot out everything else if it's not burnt at some stage. It's an ecosystem adapted to fire. Next. Just an example of one of the critically endangered plants. There is a lot of work and going on to save this species, and Debbie Reynolds from our APS Keeler Plains group has done a lot of her PhD on this plant. It's critically endangered. That's the subspecies up near the Little Desert. Next. Just an example about how some plants are adapted. When you look at Pimelia spinescens, for example, it has these great big long deep roots adapted to getting down into the clay. So even when they're drying and cracking, it's got deep roots, even though the plant up top might be burnt and chewed and, there's not much of it there. It will have these deep tap roots going down. Next. So just speaking about the Aboriginal occupation, more than 40,000 years of occupation. And there are still plenty of signs around with shield trees and other things like in the Maribyrnong River. The next slide will show just the remains of fish trap area. I see Debbie's comment there. Thanks, Debbie. So it's not really that long since Europeans first let sheep loose on the plains, but there are still plenty of signs of Aboriginal occupation. Next. So talking about gardening, we're not going to, recreate the plains. We can grow rare and unusual plants. We can create a garden. We're not going to be burning in our gardens generally. We're not going to be probably able to grow river red gums and so forth, but we can create little miniature Indigenous habitat gardens, and we can attract a lot of insects, birds, reptiles, and we can make diverse ecosystems with rock piles, logs, a big variety of types of plants, layering those plants for shelter for birds and shelter for insects. Some principles, like I haven't used pesticides, in 35 years on my garden. We have our cats inside. No rodenticides is very important if you want to look after our owls. I had a great thing happen the other night where I was just hearing this little boop, boop noise, and I didn't know where it was coming from. And it seemed to be coming from the fireplace. And then I went outside, and there's a boobook owl up on the aerial, the top of the chimney, and it's sort of echoing down through the fireplace. So even in Thornbury, you can get these sort of creatures and birds. And grasses are critical. I'll mention Dr. Louis Marta's research for the Melbourne City Council, because his presentation sort of opened my eyes to the importance of Indigenous grasses for insects. He did survey work actually going into Melbourne's parks, and he actually counted the invertebrates on all the different species, and the species that had the most different insects on them, hosting them, were by far and away the Indigenous grasses. The area that had the least was the non-native lawn areas. After the Indigenous grasses came Indigenous shrubs. Shrubs like Goodenia ovata, I think, topped the list. And I don't actually cover it today, but it's a good plant that flowers all year round. So, the solid research shows that indigenous grasses are best for habitat. And caterpillars, I love to see caterpillars because caterpillars mean there's moths and butterflies. And I'll mention moths because I'm going to cover moths a little bit. I've got a book called Moths and Their Food Plants in Southern Australia. There are over 20,000 species of moths in Australia. There's 10 times the number of moths than there are butterflies. And caterpillars are just machines for turning greenery into protein for birds. So they're wonderful things. And local insects love local plants. Next. So I'm going to just start with some trees. I'm speaking to the converted, I know, and people will have more botanical knowledge than me, but I'll whip through some of the trees, some of the shrubs, some of the flowering plants, and there's more detail about all of these in our book, Plants of Melbourne's Western Plains. So this is all around Melbourne on the rocky escarpments and hills around Melbourne. We had weeping she oak, not many left because it was great fuel in the early days, apparently. Beautiful tree. Next. And the different form, the upright form of, if you see a she oak, it will be Alocasuarina littoralis, the black she oak. More in the forested areas, perhaps, than on the plains and the hilly areas, but important for cockatoos. Next. I'm just showing the different form there, the upright growth of littoralis and the weeping she oak with the weeping growth. Next. And of course, river red gums. I must admit, I do have some river red gums in pots. Even in pots, they seem to get a bit of habitat happening. They get the little scale on them and the lerps that I find birds feeding on. They're all across the plains where there's enough water, where there's drainage lines, or in the west, right across the plains, river red gums. Next. Grey box is an underrated tree, long-lived, really hardy tree, like out on the western plains of Melbourne, where places like Ainsbury, one of the last grey box forests, Eucalyptus microcarpa. It's slow growing, it's tough, and it doesn't have the big red flowers, but it has the white flowers that will attract lots of insects. 133 bird species have been found in the Ainsbury forest. It's some grassy woodlands. Next. I love this tree, and I've got one that I grew from seed 35 years ago that it's about that size now at the school over the road in Thornbury, and it attracts so many birds, the local species of the yellow gum. Next. And of course, the bull oak. The bull oak was a feature of the plains and still is in parts. There's remnant trees, not widely enough planted, and yeah, very tough tree for dry environments. It only get half the rain out around Melton that you get in the eastern suburbs, and it manages to survive quite well. Next, the bull oak has its own mistletoe, the bull oak mistletoe, and then the mistletoe has its own butterflies. So you're creating an ecosystem when you're planting trees. Mistletoe is a great thing if you happen to have it, or if it pops up in your garden, don't chop it out. Next. Another lovely little tree, and everybody should fit one of these in, I think, is Banksia marginata. The plains form got to be quite a big tree. There's a lot smaller shrubs around. It's a very variable plant across Victoria and right up the east coast. It's but like the Banksias and like the coast Banksias, lots of nectar in autumn and winter when honey eaters really need a boost. So it's a great thing for birds. Next. And the wattles, you really do need wattles in your garden. Moth larvae, caterpillars love acacia. There's lots of species that rely on acacia. And this is, of course, one of the most beautiful ones, our national floral emblem. They mightn't last long. Sometimes they last 10, 15 years, but often they'll grow up really fast, create a great screen and a great show, and then you replace them again. But I don't mind that. I think a lot of native plants, we seem to worry, we want things that have got to last for 50 years, but in fact, there's a lot of turnover in grasslands and in the bush. So grow things for a short time, and when they die, replace them with 5 other things. Next. Just showing the ID there, and they even have a little gland that gives off a little bit of nectar sometimes on the golden wattle. That's how you ID it. Often with acacias, it's where that gland is that will be one of the ID features. I think it should be grown really widely. Next one. Another fantastic habitat plant is our black wattle. Again, nitrogen fixing like all the acacias. Wonderful habitat. It's small creamy flowers, and it flowers very similar to the silver wattle, Acacia dealbata, but that flowers earlier and has a more golden flower. This is later with a creamier flower. And they can grow, you know, 2 or 3 meters a year if they're in the right spot. And both these butterflies I photographed on black wattles. So the imperial blue butterfly has an association with ants, and only really its larvae are laid on the black wattle, and they're protected by ants. And a dainty swallowtail just landed on one. Next. So I'm always looking for things that are great habitat, and this flowers beautifully, quite long flowering in summer. Bassaria spinosa, you should all be growing this one too. I've got about 3 in my garden in Thornbury. They're just terrific habitat, and they're bright. Can't go past them. Mine's covered with these tiny little wasps, and terrific stuff. Next one. This is perhaps a bit problematic in gardens because it can get 3 or 4 meters wide and it's very prickly. But if you've got the room and not near pathways, then it's great prickly bird habitat. Yeah, it's well worth growing just for the birds. This shows my garden a few years ago, just on the nature strip. I was lucky enough they put a little slowdown straight in front of my place. There's a school over the road where we've planted lots of native indigenous plants over the years. And in the main feature here is the senna. These were called cassias, they're now sennas. There's several subspecies of Senna artemisides. They're very hardy. You know, they range across most of Australia and often in desert country. And they look like a bit like wattles. People say, what's that wattle? But it's a beautiful Senna. And they have attract a small yellow butterfly. You can just see there too, down on the left, there's some themata growing, some small flowering things. I've got some of the native flax down there and a few things. I do grow plants from all over Australia, I must admit, but I always throw in a lot of indigenous stuff. Next. And what's great about having a nature strip, actually, when you're out there, you often get comments from people walking past, and you can talk to them about the plants and tell them what you're growing and talk about indigenous plants and stuff. So it's a lovely thing to do, just to meet your neighbours as well. Some of the salt bushes are terrific habitat, and they're really good garden plants, good landscaping plants. You know, this classic grey effect, and they really do cover the ground and make it difficult for the weeds as well. This is just in a park in Essendon there. It's a pretty nice planting. Rhagodia spinescens is not really local, it's a bit further north, but if you're looking for things that'll handle climate change and a drier climate, that's very tough. And it'll actually grow quite well in shade, surprisingly enough too. You see the little berries down on the right too. Skinks and lizards apparently love the berries of salt bushes. Next, the Dodonias, wedge-leaf hotbush. Their little fruit, their winged fruits show up quite well. Sometimes they're quite ready like this, sometimes more green. Very tough plant again. It grows further inland as well. Next. Next one. Okay, you probably know grevilleas, Grevillea rosemarinifolia. There are some original ones out in the craggy burn grasslands. They just prefer the rocky knolls rather than out in the middle of the grass. But there's some stunning areas where they're there and they're overgrown with the clematis microphylla, and they look really beautiful. Something for a damper spot, the Leptospermum lanigerum, a beautiful soft tea tree. They're on the Merry Creek and the Darabin Creek and places like that, on the edges of grasslands where it's wet. Next, lovely small little daisy bush. You know, there's lots and lots of different Olerias, but this is one that is indigenous to Melbourne, just 1 metre tall, and one plant will have, 1,000 little flowers on it. Very nice. There are lots of peas. I've only popped one in that I photographed at Evans Street. Evans Street, Sunbury, if you haven't been there, is a lovely place to see a little bit of remnant grassland. It's extraordinary what remains there on about, I don't know, is it 2 or 3 hectares next to a supermarket, but it's on the railway line and it was regularly burnt by the old Vic Rail. So it's actually been preserved. It has a little knoll and it has some damper areas. So the variety of orchids, and lilies, peas and things is just quite amazing. Next. I should have said with the peas too, look, they can be a bit tricky, some of them. Plant them en masse. If you can plant 4 or 5 or 5 or 7, they say plant in odd numbers, but another little plant that you wouldn't really know is there until it flowers is Pimelia, little Pimelia glauca. These little rice flowers, each little tubular flower is designed for butterflies, really, and moths. So. Next. Another stunning little plant, the little Stackhausias, creamy candles. It's a particular version of them that grows on the plains that's sort of a bit stumpier than the others. But you can see this is just a natural scene, another little remnant right in the middle of industrial areas in the west of Melbourne, the Derrimut native grasslands, another spot worth checking out. You can see around the basalt floaters and the action of the clay compacting each summer and then in the winter brings up these basalt floaters from the rock below, which is quite an amazing process. Someone's asked about where you purchase these things. I'll mention a few Indigenous nurseries at the end, but in Melbourne, if you're in Melbourne, nurseries such as La Trobe Uni Wildlife Reserve Nursery there, the Newport Lakes Nursery and Vink in Fairfield, they'd all have a lot of these Indigenous plants. I think this is a bit harder to get, this particular Stackhausia, but I think the Newport Lakes has it. Next. Brachyscone basaltica. I've had one in a pot now for several years, and it's amazing. I just keep putting it in a bigger pot. Loves moisture, and if you keep watering it, it keeps flowering. And it can, one little plant in a pot can have 400 or 500 flowers on it. And it's always got hoverflies and a range of other things come to it. Beautiful little plant, really. And it'll naturally die back if it's not in a damp situation, and then come again. Next. Another stunning thing, and this is one that's caught on in the nursery industry, and it's got fancy name, baby something. I'm not sure what it's called, but It's the chamomile sunray is a lovely plant. I had them lining my front path. They lasted between 2 and 4 years, so they don't necessarily live long. But you know, we don't seem to mind planting annuals that are European annuals every year. Why not renew your indigenous plants every couple of years? Next. More daisies, stunning daisies. Leucochrysum albicans is a beautiful, beautiful plant, very rare to certain roadsides right out on the Western Plains, but Victoria, beautiful plant for a container, I think. It's another one that, you know, it might last a year or 3, but, you know, you cut it back after flowering and it might come again nicely. Or collect the seed and sow it. Another thing that's a daisy, and you mightn't tell that it's a daisy because it doesn't have the ray florets that make up the classical daisy, but this, like the middle of the daisy, is the important bit because each of those heads is made up of hundreds of individual little flowers. That's what makes a daisy a daisy. But there's lemon beauty heads, is a stunning plant, again, likes a bit of moisture. But that's in the wild there. That's just growing out in the Craigieburn grasslands, and a beautiful little patch out there. Looks terrific in the garden. Next. Another lovely thing, similar sort of looking thing, except even brighter, is a golden buttons, Pycnosorus chrysanthus. That's a photo from Marie Goods. I think that might even be up around the little desert somewhere in a damp spot. I'll have to ask Marie. Next. And one of the rare ones, the lonely button wrinklewort. You might have heard about the campaign to save this. There's just, it's very rare and endangered, but you know, so grow it and collect the seed and grow it again, spread it around. Rutidosus leptorhynchoides, tricky to pronounce, but a lovely little daisy. I think that one was taken just at Victoria University, in the grasslands there at Iramu. They have some beautiful plants in there, and they've reintroduced some of the rare things in there as well. Next. Another stunning plant. This is the yellow form, and this is the grey leaf form, which I think is more from the Alps or perhaps somewhere on the coast of South Australia. But the one we get here, the one you find at Evans Street or other places, has more green foliage, but the grey form is pretty striking. It's another one that has it has this lovely sort of chunky form, arching branches. Should be in every garden. Looks great in groups or along edges as well. The clustered everlasting. Next. So many daisies. And the one we call common, the common everlasting. And this is a little garden there just out at Cranbourne, at the Botanic Gardens Cranbourne, the Australian garden. You should all, I suppose, have been there. I hope you have. But it makes a great display, and that's growing under some ironbarks. It's pretty tough. I find it does like a bit of water to flower really well, and it likes a bit of sun, but it handles sort of half shade. Chrysoscephalum apiculatum, beautiful planted en masse, but it'll easy grow from cutting. So you want to get more plants, just break off little bits, chop, you know, make little cuttings out of them. Next, Michael Chincotter's made a comment about the grey leaf form growing on the Plenty Gorge of that Chrysoscephalum. I can't take notice of all the comments, but I'll check them all out at the end. Yam daisies, of course, which was Microceras lanceolata. I think it's Walter right now, the one on the plains. Cultivated by First Peoples, of course, and early, you know, Westerners saw people spread out across the plains with digging sticks, cultivating this and digging up some and leaving others. I find it gets a bit lost in my garden, and I've grown it more successfully in pots. But once you have it, you can, spread the tubers around and grow more of it. Next. And one way to ID it is that it has drooping buds. So particularly if you're in the Alps and you've got these mixed in with dandelions everywhere, the Microceras, the yam daisy, are the ones with the drooping buds. It's a quick way to tell the difference. Next. Another stunning daisy. See, we've got lots of daisies. The swamp everlasting, critically endangered. Seems very handy in a pot though. I grow them in pots and they come up and they've always got things wanting to come along and pollinate them. And very bright, classic paper daisy, bright centre there. Stunning. Next. Coronidium. I think I've just got thousands of daisies today. I like this one because there's the big bug on the coronidium. But these are a lovely, that's probably a bit past its best, it's a bit faded, but they always do have a little sort of faded brown edge to them, which is how you can tell the flowers of this one. Coronidium scorpioides. All your Indigenous nurseries should have all these plants. Yeah, someone said that they might be too wet. They do like a well-drained spot, the coronidium. They're more in places like the Brisbane Ranges in the drier country there. Another thing that we found in Sunbury on escarpments, I remember Russell Best in our group, climbing up an escarpment to get to these, the Australian hollyhock. They're mainly on the coast, but there's a few inland places as well. Great spires, about 1.5 to 2 metres tall, covered in flowers. And there were bull ants all over this one. It's a bit unusual, but they're quite a striking plant for the garden. Malva preciana. Next. Linum marginale. This one's very easy to grow, and if you put it in once, it'll keep coming from seed. So it's a beautiful blue, like a plumbago blue. Really, really pretty. And again, hoverflies seem to particularly like it. I don't mind it spreading in the garden. It's easy to pull out if you get too much of it. Next. Impact plant you don't want to put in a spot where people will walk on it is the blue devil, Eryngium ovinum. And I've got that photo via iNaturalist. All the photos tonight are mine, except where I say that they're somebody else's. So, and I don't know why I didn't put whose it was on iNaturalist, but yeah, striking plant, great in grasslands, all through our Western grasslands. Next. Lilies. Oh, jump back to those lilies. Here we go. The early Nancy, the Wormbia doika. Never quite know how to pronounce that. There's male and female ones of that. I think that's a female. And the bulbine lily's fantastic. I've got it on my nature strip in Thornbury, and it keeps coming. It spreads, it seeds, self-seeds. I might have mentioned in my principles earlier on to keep some bare soil, but if you do keep some bare soil in your garden and it's not all mulch, it's better for things to self-seed into. It's also better for our native bees. A lot of our local bees actually are ground nesting bees. So that's a bit of a thing to know. And they're beautiful plants, and particularly close up, of course. Next. I might try and start my video and see if it makes the internet connection unstable again. We'll see how it goes. The bluegrass lily, that's another thing, it's all along the railway line at Sunbury. It's a natural thing in damp areas of the grasslands, and a beautiful little lily, and it's quite distinctive in the buds are sort of twisted as they come out. Lovely little thing. Next. This was a Valleja. It's now back to being a Gardenia paradoxa, spur-winged. It's got little spurs. You can see down at the base of the flower there, the little spurs on it. Not, one plant mightn't be a big show, but if you've got a low-lying little bare area, then put 10 of them in. Next. Chocolate lilies. Not so widely spread on the plains, but associated areas, perhaps more on the rocky knolls and so forth. Again, mass planting is terrific, and on the warm days, certain times on warm days, you'll get that chocolate scent too. And you'll always get pollinators coming to these. Next one. Lilies. Not lilies. The orchids, Orchidaceae. I do have some Diurus in a pot, but I don't have either of these. It's the critically endangered one. I had to get special permission to go and photograph that one on it from the Department of Environment at the time. That's been reintroduced, Diurus fragrantissima. In fact, the Melbourne Botanic Gardens, Dr. Nushka Wright are doing amazing work in growing on a rare and threatened species of orchids. And it involves finding out the mycorrhizal fungi that's associated with them, the pollinator, the soil, the pH, the rainfall, every little factor. And they're designed to be pollinated by certain things, like certain wasps. So very hard to get back once they're lost. The Western Plains of Melbourne, parts of the plains were white like snow with that Diurus fragrantissima once. It was called the sunshine orchid. There were so many of them around sunshine. There's still Diurus punctata in places around Melbourne, Riddles Creek railway line and places like that. And you see them across the volcanic plains. Next. This is a stunning plant, really impactful for the garden. If any of you have been to the Kimberley, it's, the tie lotus up there, featherheads, almost dominate the landscape. There's so many different species. But this is quite a chunky plant. This may be 80 centimetres, quite big flowers, large featherheads, beautiful plant. Again, if they die down, but they'll come up again the next year. Next. And of course, our Dianellas. I noticed Michael Cincotta on the hook up there. They're very interesting plants, and they make me buzz pollinated by native bees. That was a lucky photo I took of a bee there coming in. It's actually coming into a different plant, but close up, I think the Dianellas are beautiful, and they're very tough. Next. And the Dianella amoena, the critically endangered one. Why not grow some of that? Matted flax lily. I love the colour of the flowers there too. Really nice. We've got our own pelargonium. That's a plant that almost disappears over a dry summer, and then it'll come back in winter, and by spring it's got flowers. So don't mind if these things die back. If they die back, cut all the branches off, and then you'll see new growth coming up the next year, hopefully. But yeah, lovely flowers close up. Another lovely little pelargonium, really lovely magenta, and beautiful weeping over a rock wall or something like that. I think this is a stunning little plant to grow. Next one. This plant, you don't know this is there, very sort of narrow leaves and lightly creeping through the grasslands, through the thermita on the plains, and then suddenly it flowers, and it's quite striking. So you could be putting 3 or 4 of these in amongst your grasses, and suddenly they all burst into next one. Next. Oh, are we going to the next one? Have we lost Adrian? Oh, there we are. Another, oh, I'm getting the internet is unstable. I'll turn the video off for the minute. Next.
We lost you for a second there, Chris, but
oh, did you? Okay.
We didn't hear about
go back to which didn't you hear about?
the Pymela humilis.
Oh, okay. I'm just saying they're a lovely little plant. Debbie thinks this might be her photograph. Could be. I might have snaffled it, Debbie. Might be the one from the book. Next one. Another shot just taken out at the railway line, and it's showing Brunonia australis. Again, tricky to keep alive in the garden, but seems better in a pot. Perfect drainage, but you know, one of these things, perfect drainage, but never likes to dry out. But then, you know, handles all sorts of good conditions out in the wild. So that's growing with the Chrysocephalum apiculatum there. It's a beautiful blue, really nice. And there is a double form as well, which is quite spectacular. Next, Hardenbergia, of course, you've got these large forms of this that sort of all over fences. The local indigenous one is more a little light creeper or climber, but it's a nice thing to have. Another pea, beautiful purple. I must admit, I like mixing it in with the white one in the garden. It's great to have climbers for bird habitat, for nesting. You know, the birds not only like the dense areas for building their nests, but they like the fluffy seed pods that come after the flowers on this clematis are sought after by birds for lining their nests. So it's a beautiful thing. Next one. Now I'm going to get onto the grasses. I haven't got too many of the grasses, and obviously grasslands have lots of different grasses, depending on, you know, what kind of, whether it's dry, whether it's wet. Kangaroo grass is the dominant grass of all of the volcanic plains, and it can be a beautiful feature plant in the garden. You know, this has just got some evening sun on it. It's a really pretty thing. Can even be grown in pots. Can get to 1.2 meters. That's 1.5 even tall. I've seen it. Can get a bit outrageous. It's a summer growing grass. You give it water in the summer and it'll go mad. Next, wallaby grass and red anther wallaby grass. Two beautiful ones, and all of these grasses, they're important habitat. They've got insects living in the clumps at the base, and little birds coming for seeds and that sort of thing. Next. This is a very lovely thing, long-haired plume grass, Dicolacne crenita. I've mentioned there about Melbourne City Council, again with the grasses. When the grasses go to seed, if you're lucky, you might even get the red-browed finches and little birds coming in. But I like these just as a garden feature. Next one. And these make a beautiful feature, and they're often more in the drier parts. So you might see on grassland, you'll see sort of a slightly hilly area, and you'll see the ostrostipers are often in the drier bits where they can take over from the kangaroo grass. The next slide, I think, shows, oh no, doesn't. This is weeping grass. I'm told this is a really good butterfly food. This is Rhina Richter's photo. Can make a lawn as well. I don't know if any of you have a lawn of this. Doesn't need mowing that often and stays nice and green if you water it in summer, but it's food for several butterflies. Neil Masters, who was the biodiversity manager for Metro Rail, raved to me about the value of this plant for butterflies. Oh, someone, Grey Bee, has got a lawn of microlana. Of course, our Poa lab, we call it, Poa labelardiarii, after the French botanist or explorer, one of those. This is just down near the banks of the Merri Creek in the upper reaches, so it does like damp sites. It does like a bit of summer water. You can chop these right back once a year to refresh them. Marilyn Bull. Okay, Marilyn, I didn't realise you were on the hookup. Very good. This was the one that that Dr. Louis Marta said had the most invertebrates in it of any plant in all of Melbourne's parks and gardens when he did that survey as an entomologist. Great habitat. And there's also, if you have drier areas, there's Poa morrisi, and there's other different Poas that'll handle them better as well. Yeah. Next. This is a photo I took several years ago. The Werribee Zoo had a feature volcanic plains garden. It's all gone now. It's such a pity. But this is just showing what you can do with swathes of grass and you know, the little Chrysocephalum apiculatum, and in the background you've got some Lomandra there. But it was a lovely thing, and it shows that you can make quite a display with the grasses. Very good. Next one. Next slide. There we go. Don't forget your rushes and sedges. I haven't really gone into them much at all. This is just to answer someone's question there. Now, Melton Botanical Garden tried to have a little local Indigenous patch. It's not really, it hasn't been all that successful in my view. There's a few things there that are going all right, but it needs a bit of work, I think. So caryxes and club rushes, and again, a lot of these things have particular associations with certain insects, and some are quite beautiful, like that tassel sedge there. Next. And our book will say more about the particular conditions for growing all of those things as well. This is Chris Larkin's garden out near the Dandenongs, and she's lucky she's got a fair bit of space, but it shows what you can do if you add water to the landscape. You've got grasses, you've got sedges, you've got water plants, shrubs, trees, rocks, a whole lot of wonderful habitat there. A layered garden is the best sort of garden for habitat. Next. Just to show you a bit more, you know, you might think Lomandras can look pretty scrappy. It helps if they're sort of cut back a bit. But if you see the little sections out of them, like there on the right, it's probably the caterpillars of the splendid ochre butterfly that are doing that. So I always wondered, why are these such great habitat plants? And then Neil Masters showed me, well, have a look for these little edges. And if the edges are being eaten, that'll be the butterfly larva. Next one. And I didn't mention our local Brachyscome multifida. It's certainly a beautiful, hardy little daisy with flowers most of the year. I've got them in my garden, and I just have, for about 6 months of the year, I have these little pairs of grass starts living in the garden, the most common butterfly in my garden in Thornbury, and they love that daisy. Next. The Xerochrysum viscosum was another daisy, and the cuckoo bee. That's got a beautiful story. If you don't know about cuckoo bees, they're like cuckoo birds. They follow bees like the blue-banded bee to their nests, and then they lay their eggs in there, and the blue-banded bees look after their young. But they're a stunning bee. I didn't know what it was when I first found it, and then you can read the story about them. They're magnificent creatures. But the Xerochrysum viscosum is a great garden plant. Flies are terrific pollinators. People underestimate flies, not just hoverflies, but all sorts of species of flies. You'll often see flies pollinating plants, and the work they do is most underrated. But and magnificent moths. I threw this in just because I love learning more about moths. We had Kathy Powers, who was the previous president of Australian Plant Society, put up a white sheet and a big lamp up in the Alps at Falls Creek, and 140 different species of insects came in, mostly moths. There's huge numbers of moths, and the bush and the grasslands are alive at night with moths. They're things that will be doing heaps of pollinating. So we need to look after our moths and not keep lights on where we don't need them on. And they're wonderful things. Next. Tell me if I'm going too long, Adrian. Just mentioning skinks and reptiles. Hopefully, if you have a pile of rocks in a sunny spot and you have plants with little berries and so forth, you can attract skinks. A little bit of water for the water skinks. Next. I have a bird bath, or 3 actually, but I've put them 2 meters high. So this is up on the stump of an old tree. And because I've planted lots of prickly, dense things around near there, I get the little birds as well. And the red wattle birds and noisy miners seem to keep away. So far, that is. But some of the little birds like this brown thornbill will come to your garden. And you don't need a lot of space. You can have a little habitat garden in a pot. You can have a little pond garden, you can grow indigenous plants. Next. Okay, so if you do want to find out more about this, a lot of you might know about this one, but Melbourne Uni, and I presume, Adrian, I think you might have been involved in this, but this is a fantastic resource to go into all the different grasslands plants, find out more about them and where they occur and how to grow them. It's a terrific field guide. Next, I do want to mention our big conference coming up. So if you missed it, I'm National Vice President of the Australian Plant Society, and we're putting on every 10 years or so, Victoria gets to host our big conference. It's going to be on Gardens for Life. It's a national conference at the Melbourne Exhibition Centre there. We'll have week-long tours before and afterwards. We'll have excursions during the week, but 3 solid days of presentation on gardens for wildlife and habitat, saving threatened species, gardens for wellbeing, botanic gardens, restoration and revegetation, insects and biodiversity, indigenous food plants, garden design. So you just go to our website and there's already a couple of newsletters there. You can just register for free your interest, and then you'll be sent the newsletters and you'll be updated. And they're lovely newsletters with a lot of great photos as well. Next one. A couple of other little pleases, things to do. Yeah, visit your local Indigenous nursery and get planting. You learn about stuff by getting out there and doing it. I think all of the plants I've mentioned, except the orchids, are available. You can buy our book, join the Australian Plant Society. If you go to Australian Plant Society Keilor Plains, you can learn about the book. The Indigenous nurseries all have copies of our book. This is a wonderful network, the Grassy Plains Network, focused on campaigning to save our important grasslands, and also join the VNPA more broadly, help create more national parks, get proper funding for our national parks. The conference is next year, by the way. When I said September, it's a year away, but we're planning it. I'm planning the trips now. There'll be 3 trips, one out to the Grampians and Little Desert along the coast, one to Wilson's Prom and down that way. And one to the Great Southwest and the Otways, one to the Grampians and the Little Desert, and one to the Wilson's Prom. All right. A plea to write a letter. Not only do grasslands need saving, but 300,000 hectares of Queensland bush is being cleared every year. And another plea, get out and photograph things and pop them onto iNaturalist. But thank you very much for listening. I know I've probably gone on beyond my time. But thanks very much.
No, thank you so very much, Chris. That was fantastic and so detailed. And glorious photos. I'm going to be coming back to the 2 copies of your book that I have, and we've just had a renovation, so the builders have absolutely destroyed both our back and front garden. So we have a blank slate to work with. So that's been very inspiring. I'm sure many people have questions they want to ask. I've just got to get the chat back on my screen. It seems to have gone walkabout.
I've seen samples of bits and pieces, and thank you for everybody for the feedback. But
can you hear me, Chris? I'd like to ask a question.
Yeah.
Oh, I was wondering if there's an old. So you were saying that kangaroo grass can take over a spot of grassland. I'm wondering if you see an old dense patch of kangaroo grass. If you burn it back, you'll have any chance of these more herbaceous species coming back again. Like what's the sort of, you know, if it's taken over a space, how, you know, can it be too far gone, or is the seed bank still viable for some time?
Yeah, it's amazing what can live in the seed bank, and even burning patches of phalaris, and you'll sometimes get indigenous stuff coming up. For instance, vanilla lilies came up on the banks of the Darebin Creek when they burnt head-high phalaris. So it's never too late to do a bit of judicious burning and see what happens. But there should be, you know, it shouldn't always be regular, and it should be patchwork, but I think there needs to be burning of most grasslands on a fairly regular basis. And I've just been rough there with saying 5 to 7 years. But I'm not an expert on that by any stretch. There's probably other people on the hookup who are more across that than I am.
Yeah, I'd just say that the main thing is that if it gets too dense, the thermida and all the dry thatch, it stops sunlight and rain water getting down to the ground layer. So that's why you're wanting to keep it open. It's so if it's stuff still getting down there, then that probably doesn't need to be burnt, and vice versa.
Yeah, there's no doubt that first people systematically burnt grassland areas, perhaps not so much the wet forests and places, but grasslands. Yeah, we've had a lot of fire, particularly in the last 40,000 years, so the plants are adapted to it.
Indeed. There's questions. So
What's another one?
People want to know how tall everyone's Basaria spinosa are. It's I know there's one outside the back of the Botanic Gardens in Melbourne. It must be like 5 meters high or something. It's a grand old tree, really. But that's a rare one.
Well, some of them get big quickly. I've got one at 5 meters and it's 15 years old. It's in a great spot, but yeah, I have seen them with great big, with trunks that you can hardly get your arms around.
Indeed. What else do we have? 6 meters, says Michael Cincotta. There you go. Other questions, everybody?
I'm just looking back at the chat there. So if you've put something in as a question as we've gone along and want to raise it now, here's your chance. Oh, and people have put up the links to our conference, which is terrific. And if people want to also like our follow our APS Victoria Facebook page, that would be fantastic too. And I'll share stuff there from the Grassy Plains Network as well.
Thanks, Chris. I should mention to everyone too that this has been recorded. Well, you got that message. So we'll have a link up to this on our Facebook page in due course in the next couple of days. And if you go to our website, you'll find the Grassy Talks page there too, and you'll be able to find this talk and all the other Grassy Talks that we've had this year, all there for your viewing enjoyment. So let's wrap this up. Let's say thank you again, Chris. You didn't see us laughing at your wry comments and so on, but we were. I assure you, it was very, very informative and great to have that wealth of knowledge here being shared.